Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar. We're very excited to provide tips and tricks for yourself and your children to get the sleep you need and deserve throughout this turbulent time. We're very fortunate today to have Akira Seuradge from WeeSleep as our facilitator today. Akira is a mom of 3 little ones and a certified infant and toddler sleep consultant. If you have any questions at any time throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the question and answer or the chat function at the bottom of your screen at any time, and we will ensure that we get all of these addressed at the end of the session. Over to you, Akira.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for participating today. And thank you so much to you, Christy, and to Kids & Co. for creating this virtual opportunity for us to connect and to create all of these experiences for us while we are all at home. If you have an opportunity and you have a free hand, if you're not holding your little one, if you could drop in the chat the age group of your child. I am going to be covering from newborn to briefly on toddler, but it would be helpful if I could just briefly have a quick look at the ages of your babes so that I can be able to speak to that more specifically. So just about me again, thank you for that amazing introduction. I am an infant and toddler sleep consultant. I'm a certified child sleep specialist through WeeSleep, and WeeSleep is the organization that I partner with to help families across the globe to help you with your sleep challenges. So I am going to be sharing a couple slides in my screen. So if you can jig your configuration so that you're able to see the slides, that would be great. Also, whoever wants to participate by showing their screen, I'd love to see your face, but no pressure. If you don't want to hop on video, that's okay too. So if you're here and you're participating, you're likely interested in sleep, whether you're preparing for babe or you're already having some struggles. You've probably been looking on the interwebs about information on sleep, and if you're really in the thick of it, you may even Google things like, why is my baby not sleeping? I know I've done that in the past. But what I want to flag you is on that, if you could take all the information that you are viewing online with a grain of salt. I find there is a wide variety of different types of information on sleep. Some information is actually contradictory and can be quite confusing and stressful, especially when you're going through a difficult time with sleep. And I want to make sure that you don't be too hard on yourself. Give yourself some grace. Children are going through a lot. You're going through a lot. So, you may see things like co-sleeping is good, co-sleeping is bad. Pacifiers are good, pacifiers are bad. Sleeping through the night, sleeping independently, don't sleep independently. So I can understand it can certainly be a challenge when you don't really know what to do. And that's pretty much part of my job. So as an infant and toddler sleep consultant or a certified child sleep specialist, I help families to strategize the best method to get their little ones sleeping through the night. So the methods that we use are tried, tested, and true. And we guarantee that we have your little one sleeping in 10 days or less in a gentle, guided, and loving way. So I'm just going to go through quickly some of the areas that we will touch on. So if you do have questions in some of these areas, please know that we're going to touch on them. And if we don't get your question answered, you will have an opportunity to book a complimentary consultation with me. You will all get emailed a link post webinar. So we're going to discuss newborn, infant, and toddler sleep. We're going to talk about scheduling, regressions, sleep training, sleep demands by age, understanding naps, sleep and development, some common sleep challenges, sleeping through the night, and how to work with me, and then your question and answer period. So much to, taking the information with a grain of salt, all babies and families are different. So if you're comparing your sleep journey to another family, of a mom who has had a 2-week-old and has been sleeping through the night ever since, we don't know what's going on in that home to get that little one to sleep. We don't know exactly, the experience and the routines that they have, and every child is so different. So please try not to compare so much. Absolutely, there are some, fundamental things that are happening age by age, but try to be sure to just look at your own unique experience, collect as much information as you can, and then kind of relate it to what you're going through. So I'm just going to take a quick peek and see if I can see some of the age groups here. So we have 16 months, 12 months, 11 months, some toddler ages, 21 weeks, 2.5 years. Okay, perfect. So definitely a lot of you have already experienced this newborn phase, and just to reflect on it a little bit, the newborn phase is definitely challenging because they're growing so rapidly. And I'm sure you've noticed already with your little ones that they go through that period where they're growing so quickly and then it starts to slow down. But within that period, their needs and demands for food and sleep are so high. It makes it so difficult for them because of those demands. So not only that, it's also because they have an underdeveloped body clock, and that's actually what controls their sleep. So because they don't have this natural body clock that's happening, we don't always know when exactly they need sleep and how much sleep that they need, because they're growing so quickly and those demands are forever increasing and decreasing as the days go by. As parents, that's probably the biggest adjustment that we have when we, bring a new child into our home, is that, all of a sudden this lack of sleep. And I find that that's kind of one of the biggest things that we can overcome. And if you're expecting a child, putting that expectation in your head that yes, sleep is going to change for you, I find is very helpful. And even if you're struggling through sleep with a lot of night wakes, that expectation, keeping that top of mind, that it is normal for your child to be waking more frequently, and as a result, disturbing and interrupting your natural sleep patterns. But how do we get through it? So there is no really wrong answer in this newborn stage. So whatever you've done in the past, giving yourself some grace is really important. Sleep will look different from home to home, but it can look like skin to skin, baby wearing, right in the crib right away, maybe rocking, or right in the bassinet. There's no wrong answer. So really all we want to do in this newborn phase, and when I say newborn phase, I'm talking about between from 0 to 3.5 to 4.5 months. That is what I consider the newborn phase, because after that period of time, that's when we have our first leap, which could be called a sleep regression, which is when our sleep transitions from newborn style sleep to infant and toddler and adult style sleep. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. I know regressions is a huge question, so we'll definitely touch on that. So the first introduction to a schedule at this newborn phase, I recommend no schedule. The only schedule that I think that would be easiest to follow and most fair to everybody is a 12-hour schedule. So 12 hours a day, 12 hours of night. I find that that's the best introduction that we can have to understanding, our child's sleep demands, and starting to slowly set that expectation of how their sleep should be managed. So the 12 hours a day should be full of liveliness and light and noise and smells and sights and sounds and all that good stuff. So our babies know that this is a period of time in the day where the world is alive. The 12 hours of night should be more calm, quiet, dimly lit. Our interactions are much more subdued. So when we are doing diaper changes at night, we don't need the whole, oh, you did a poopy, definitely bringing that down to a more calm, just a quick change and, back to bed type of thing. That's really going to help encourage them to stay asleep during those 12 hours of night. Also, limiting electronic devices, loud noises, loud music, things like that at night will definitely be helpful. So certainly avoiding schedules at this age, I would say, don't really be too hard on yourself, but focusing more on awake time. And awake time is going to be important right up into those toddler years. So awake time is exactly what it sounds like, the time that your child spends awake in between sleeps. So that's going to vary from age group to age group. And I have a great chart that I will actually share with you guys at the end. But it'll show you, approximate age ranges of how long your child should be awake for in between sleeps. So during that period of awake time, that is where we build sleep pressure. So for the appropriate amount of time spent, based on their age, as well as the activity. So during that awake time, they should be, fed properly. They should have consumed all of their nutrition during that period of time, the length of time, and the required added amount of stimulation. So for a newborn, they're very easily stimulated, but as they get older, so if you're looking in the toddler years, like when they're awake during their natural awake time, we're going to want to make sure that they're fed. If they need to burn some energy, if they need to be running up and down, if they need to be stimulated with some learning activities, those are all things that are going to help build their sleep pressure and encourage those nice long naps. But a lot of us are home now, and maybe we're not able to get like the really long walks or really intense play. and it's becoming difficult to put them down for a nap. That's normal, completely understandable. If we need to push our naps a little bit more as well, that's totally okay. You know, a lot of us are, you know, dealing with our children now for an entire day, which maybe they've been in daycare or preschool or things like that. And now, you know, we're required to stimulate them a lot more, and it's not easy. Their preschool or daycare programs are definitely very rigorous and burn a whole lot of energy. So when they are home with us, they're definitely not doing as much. I know that a lot of us parents are super creative in finding ways to do that, and just keep trying. But if they're not ready for a nap, it's okay to kind of shift it. And if they don't sleep, you can always, you know, bring up their bedtime. So awake time is really, really important. It's one of the like fundamental components of sleep conditioning. So around that 3.5, 4.5 month mark is a sleep regression. So this regression is triggered by a transition from newborn style sleep to infant and toddler style sleep. So if you recall, your newborn likely sleeping through a lot of noise or sleeping for really long extended periods of time, like for looking very, very still without moving. So they get into this very deep sleep for a very long time. Their sleep cycles are very, very long. What happens when they go through this transition, their sleep cycles all of a sudden become very short. So between 30 and 40 minutes. So that's one of the telltale signs they're going through a regression, that they keep waking at that 30, 45-minute mark. They have a lot of trouble settling, falling asleep on their own. So those are some of the signs that that transition is happening. And some children, you won't need to do much. They will, you know, have a couple bad nights, and on the other end of it, come out sleeping for very long stretches overnight, 10 to 12 hours overnight, and, you know, they need limited support. Other children may have, you know, a couple really bad days, and then you may have to make some adjustments in their schedule for them to make it through. Other children might have some bad days and then never really get out of it. They'll continue just struggling and having really tough time going to sleep. And that's really normal around that age for them to have that transition. It's actually a really popular time for parents to sleep coach or sleep condition during this time, because it's actually a great time developmentally to drop or decrease nighttime feeds, which will encourage long stretches of overnight sleep. So that's why it's a really popular time to start sleep training as well. So regressions do happen throughout, you know, the child's development, but I find the most important one is this 3.5 to 4.5 one, because it really does change their sleep significantly. The other regressions usually are based on other developmental needs that are happening. So they can happen at different times for different children. So I find the next really, really big one between 7 and 9 months is when they're starting to walk or crawl or do babble and make a lot more connections with their parents or their caregivers. They have a little bit more separation anxiety, so that can regress their sleep a little bit as well too. And with those type of regressions, if your child is already on a great sleep routine, I say like keep consistent, keep doing what you're doing, don't change too much, and they'll come out of it. If they are continuing to regress, they may need a schedule adjustment. So key points on regressions is to, you know, just wait it out, schedule shift. Lastly, if it's an early morning that you're struggling with, you know, and they're not really protesting sleep too much, you haven't noticed much change, but they've just started waking up really early in the morning, that could indicate a regression as well too. And early morning wakes are really tough to get rid of. But there's a lot of things that you can do to help them go back to sleep. So really, really dark room is really helpful for early morning wakes, and a sound machine as well. So what is sleep training? So sleep training sometimes carries a lot of weight to it, that term sleep training, because a lot of people don't really understand what it actually means. In some circles, sleep training may just mean let your baby cry until they figure it out. Some look completely different. So those are just different methods. But what sleep training actually is, it's the components of 3 things. So the first thing is introducing a sleep conducive environment to your child. So something that is quiet, comfortable, something that they can consistently go to that encourages nice, long, healthy sleep. The second thing is that they're on an age appropriate schedule, making sure that they're on a schedule that is keep aligning them with what their body is trying to do naturally with sleep. So ensuring that they're not undertired or overtired, and that schedule is absolutely going to help them get through that. And the third thing is the development of independent sleep skills. And that will look different for every parent on how they choose to encourage independent sleep. So those three things, if you are doing any of those three things, you are already sleep conditioning your child. When I work with families, I create a step-by-step plan that helps align them with these three things, and that works with the parent to understand, what their goals are and how, based on their comfort level, what they want to do with their child in terms of how to coach them to independent sleep. So please know, like, if you've already researched some different type of methods, there's so many different ones out there. And if you've already started and you're feeling that, maybe this is not for you, it doesn't mean sleep training entirely is not for you. Perhaps it's just that method that you're looking at. So my job, is to work with parents to identify if the methods are really, truly right for them. So I help through this process by creating a specific personalized daily routine and sleep strategy that aligns with your parenting style and what your baby is already trying to do naturally with sleep. So it's not something that we want to force your baby to do. And on the other hand, I can't make your baby wake up at 7 every day and go to bed at 8 every day. They do have their own natural body clock. And I'm like a little investigative reporter trying to figure out, what they're doing. So I've learned, in my time as a sleep professional, that we have extremely high expectations when it comes to sleep for our children. And, it's one of the first questions that we ask the parent of a new baby, like, oh, are they sleeping through the night? How long are they sleeping for? I just find that if we look at sleep as a skill similar to feeding or potty training, for example, I believe we would give each other, a lot more grace because, when our little one is learning to feed, we steam the food or we make it really soft and chop it up in small pieces so that they can consume it easily. When we're potty training, we give them like a potty that's their size and we give them stickers for encouragement. So these are all things that are encouraging a natural skill. Sleep is the same thing. So sometimes we just need to create little stepping stones to help them sleep a little bit more independently, opposed to just dropping them in our crib and hoping that they would fall asleep. So I feel like when we put that perspective on it, it gives them that a little bit more, allows it to be a little bit more understanding. 20 to 30% of children have real sleep challenges, and it's unfair to just expect them to all of a sudden sleep without any support at all. And I became a sleep consultant because I was a part of that 20 to 30%. And, once I overcame my personal challenges, I wanted nothing more than to help others in the same way. It was an absolute game changer. I probably wouldn't have had any more kids if I didn't, achieve success with sleep. It's just a game changer. I have a 4-year-old who was my difficult sleeper, and a 2.5-year-old and a 3-month-old. So we have lots of excitement going on in this house. And I can't tell you that if we didn't have a great sleep routine, things would not be functioning so well, especially during this time. So even as an adult, getting the right amount of sleep is so important to being, a whole person and a good parent. And sleep deprivation is dangerous, actually. And in short term, it can really affect our ability to focus, concentrate, and, carry out simple tasks and just be patient in understanding the needs of our children. And, long-term lack of sleep, creating a sleep debt, can cause a breakdown in our immune function. And that's the last thing that we need right now. So sleep is absolutely so important. It's definitely not a badge of honor as a parent to just, go night after night without sleep, but sometimes we just don't know what else to do. And if you're at that, moment, please know that all sleep challenges are fixable. Up until even 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, we work with children. So please know that whatever challenge you're going through, there is an answer. So how much sleep do our children need? I'm going to share this slide with you here. So from 0 to 3 months, now this is in a 24-hour period. So this includes naps as well. So 0 to 3 months, you're looking at 16 to 18 hours a day. For 3 to 6 months, you're looking about 15 hours a day. And then 6 to 12 months, you're looking about 14 hours per day. The 6 to 12 month period is when things start to level out a bit, and naps are consistent for the next several months. I find the 0 to 6 month mark, the nap requirements and demands are changing quite frequently. So we'll notice, because they're going from, 5 naps to 4 naps to 3 naps to 2 naps to 1 nap. So I find the hours really fluctuate. When we get to 6 months, they definitely start to level out a bit, especially because their growth starts to slow down. So then we get to the 12-month mark, where they're sleeping about 12 to 13 hours per day. So we're looking at a goal of about 10 to 12 hours through the night. And, you know, anywhere from that 6-month mark, they're typically not feeding anymore. So those hours are likely uninterrupted. So if your child is not getting this amount of sleep, please don't be too concerned, especially at the moment with, you know, not having enough opportunity to burn enough energy. It can have a huge effect on sleep pressure. So the amount of naps, just to correspond to that, so 0 to 3 months, you're looking at 4 to 5 naps per day. 3 to 6 months, you're looking at 3 naps per day. 6 to 14 months, you're looking at about 2 naps per day. If you do have a 12-month-old that went into formal care that they drop down to 1 nap, that's okay. A lot of 12-month-olds can handle 1 nap a day, and that's completely fine. And then 15 months to 3 years, 1 nap per day. Some children will drop their nap at around 2.5, as early as 2.5. Actually, both my kids dropped their nap at about 2.5 years old. My second is just actually going through the drop. But if your child is going through a what you think is a transition to them out of a nap, I do work with families on that as well. But look for some consistency. So if they just have 2 or 3 days where they don't want to go down for a nap, I wouldn't say that they're ready. I would say, you know, looking at a few weeks at a time that they've been really protesting that nap before you consider that they might be ready to absolutely drop it. And the reason that we align these types of frequencies is because of what our body's natural circadian rhythm is trying to do. And just pull up another slide here for you, just a moment. Okay, and so our body's natural circadian rhythm is what makes us feel tired and what makes us have a lot of energy in the morning after a restful sleep. And then, you know, slowly throughout the day, it starts to encourage our bodies to feel more tired. And a lot of things are tied into that. So our blood pressure, our body temperature, our natural hormones that are released. So our body produces melatonin as part of the circadian rhythm at certain periods of time. And that actually helps to encourage us to go to sleep. So when we are aligning our sleep with that natural body clock, sleep tends to be a lot easier. So with our little ones, if, you know, they're coming down in you know, midday and it's time for that nap, but we're not consistently offering them an opportunity to sleep, then we're not aligning them with what their body's trying to do naturally. So we're missing that optimal opportunity to put them to sleep. So essentially they are operating on as if they were having jet lag. So if we're in a different time zone, you know, it's like, oh, it's bright outside. Like at this time we typically would be sleeping and we tend to have like a really hard time with it. And sometimes that's what is happening to a child at various moments of the day, day after day. So really just making sure that they're on that schedule and we're following that body clock and aligning them appropriately. So also another point on that natural body clock and circadian rhythm, it really has a big effect on early wakes. So if you're experiencing early wakes between 4 and 6 a.m., a lot of things are going on at that time. So if your little one's getting lots of good rest throughout the night and they're waking up between that period of time, they've had like quite a bit of sleep, and now their body is starting to come out of that deep sleep, and you know their blood pressure is really low, their temperature is low. So if they do get awoken, it's really difficult for them to go back to sleep. So early wakes is definitely something that can take some time to resolve, but it's absolutely fixable. Okay, so now I just want to go through some of the common sleep challenges that I experience. So I can just stop share for a moment. So if you're struggling with sleep, these may be some of the things that you're dealing with. So if I find that a lot of children that are not sleeping well, it's because they're not on an age-appropriate schedule. It's possible that they have some type of sleep dependency. So whether that dependency is to someone or something preventing them from falling asleep on their own, and it's completely natural for them to form these types of dependencies, but it's when they're no longer sustainable that they become a problem. If your baby is always crying, if they've been colic, usually colic will resolve itself around 5 months. I know my 3-month-old had pretty bad colic as well. So it's something that was new to me as not as a professional, but just as a mom. And I know it's really, really tough. Babies just always crying, definitely really challenging for them to get to sleep on their own. If your child is just waking frequently, that what we were discussing about sleep cycles. So every 30 minutes, every 45 minutes, they're just waking very frequently, can't put themselves back to sleep. Or babies that just don't sleep. We try everything. We get in the car, we're in a stroller, we're doing absolutely everything, and our little one's just not sleeping. And then they're having these like inconsistent periods where they're unable to put themselves back to sleep during a shorter sleep cycle. So this is really just fundamentally connected to independent sleep skills. So yes, they are babies. Yes, they need love, you know, they need support, but how we support them has to be sustainable. So if we're using some type of sleep association or prop to get our little one to sleep, but we're having to continually do it every 20 minutes to get them to sleep, or we're having to do it for 2 to 3 hours every night to get them to sleep, it may not be something that's helpful to them or sustainable for you. So some types of sleep props you may be familiar with are a pacifier, soother, feeding to sleep, stroller, co-sleeping, rocking to sleep. And I'm not against any of these methods again. So if, you know, popping a soother in your little one's mouth gets them to sleep or gets them to overcome a sleep cycle and gets them to sleep for a nice long stretch, that's absolutely okay. I never see that mom because she's sleeping well. But again, if it's something that is just not sustainable, your baby's not sleeping well, nobody's content in the home, then really starting to step back and look at some of these ways that we're getting our little one to sleep. So the next question is, this question that I get all the time, I'm just going to share my screen again, is sleeping through the night. So when and how? When can our babies sleep through the night? So I always say to the parent, are you ready for your little one to sleep through the night? We love our babies, and the opportunity for our child to sleep for 10 to 12 hours at night means that we're going to be without them for 10 to 12 hours at night. And are we okay with that? Are they developmentally ready to do that? So, you know, based on their age, so between, you know, 3.5 to 4.5 months, many babies are developmentally ready because they're going through that transition that we discussed earlier. And it also is common, if they're on track with their weight, they are ready to start to reduce their nighttime feeds down to even 1 feed a night. It's a great time to implement you know, a sleep conditioning method, or encouraging them to sleep through the night, because they can absolutely do it at this around this age. And when I work with families, I do an assessment to determine if they are actually ready to do that. And if they're not, there are other ways to absolutely still encourage them to sleep, even if they are still feeding through the night. So the how is, when I work with families, is that's kind of the steps that we build together and understanding how we get them to sleep through the night, but they're absolutely ready at about that time. So I would like to share with you some clear takeaway steps that we can do in your home today to encourage your little ones to sleep through the night. So hopefully you can see my screen here. So step 1 is to create a quiet and peaceful sleep environment. And that seems a little bit obvious, but something that doesn't have too many flashing lights or sounds or, you know, music, or too many things that are going to actually overstimulate them. So not to be confused with things that calm your baby. So singing and lulling and music, those are things that calm your baby, but they don't encourage sleep. So they may get them drowsy, but they don't encourage that nice long sleep. So a dark room really, really helps. Darkness actually is something that helps control our natural circadian rhythm. So when it is dark, it helps produce those sleep hormones like melatonin that helps put us to sleep. So darkness is definitely a signal to encourage that as well. If you're looking at some of your older babes, they may actually prefer like a nice small light glowing night light, and that's absolutely okay, but not, I would say, not the overhead light, because we don't want to impact that natural melatonin production. Step 2 is an early bedtime. So infants and toddlers, naturally, their bedtime usually is between 6 and 8 p.m. And that coincides with their wake up, which is usually between 6 and 8 a.m. So thinking about 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night. If they're waking around 7 in the morning, you're thinking maybe about 7 p.m. at night. So if they are experiencing early morning wakes, like 4 a.m. in the morning, and then we're putting them to bed at 8, 9 at night, even if they've had a nap in there, it's a significant amount of hours of daytime. So an early bedtime is always my go-to. Keeping your child awake for an extended period of time in hopes that they'll just tire themselves out might work one night, it might work 2 nights, but I'm telling you consistently, it's gonna create a problem. Step 3 is to set up a predictable bedtime routine, a consistent set of activities that will trigger in your baby's brain that sleep is coming is going to absolutely help encourage a great sleep routine and let them know that a big long sleep is coming. So something like a story, a bath, making sure they get a really great feed in there and they're not too drowsy is absolutely going to help support that. So these are things that are going to happen that are unique to any other part of your day so that they know when I do these series of events, a big long sleep is next. Step 4 is to put your child to bed awake. And if that is completely foreign to you and you've never done that before, and you've tried it and it didn't work, don't give up right away. It's something that children will have to learn and they need a little bit of patience through, but encouraging them to go to sleep awake will allow them to get drowsy and fall asleep on their own and prevent further night wakings because they now know how to put themselves to sleep independently. And for your older babes, you really want to anticipate all of the requests and be firm on your routine. So if your child, likes to have like a drink of water, or they like to say goodnight to their teddy bears, or they like to read 3 books, build all those things within reason as part of your bedtime routine so that once all of those things are completed, your child understands the expectation and that sleep is next. And then the last thing is, in the event of a night waking, allow for, a quick few moments to see if they'll settle. They might just be transitioning into another sleep cycle. And if we run to them right away, then they may actually be prevented from doing that. And then in turn, never really learn how to put themselves back to sleep. So giving them a few moments will allow them to practice that on their own. So if you are really struggling and some of these things that you've tried and they're not working, I work with families through this all over the world, and this is how I help them do it. So we work together by starting with a prospect call. So that's what you all are going to receive a link for post-meeting. So 15 minutes will be a free call to identify, your goals and whether we can work together. After the prospect call, we're going to book a specific program. So we do have virtual programs that are available right now. So we have fast, budget-friendly, or the more one-on-one support type of program. So the programs typically last 2 weeks, and we'll go through that together. So before we start working together, I will create a document for you that will be a detailed intake and assessment that will allow me to understand, what's going on with your little one. There'll be some tracking in there. And then following that, we'll have an in-depth consultation. So we'll have an hour-and-a-half long consultation where we will work together to build your sleep plan. And then we will be working together for 2 weeks, personalized online support. So you'll have access to our private portal where you will be uploading everything, all the information, so that I can follow along with you as if I'm right there in your home. And then ultimately the goal is getting sleep in 10 days or less. That's essentially how we will work together. I hope that there has been lots of value in this for you, and I'm here for you. Even if you want to send me an email for a quick question or just to chat about sleep, I would love to hear it. And I'm absolutely open to additional questions at this time. So I know that there's some in the chat, but I will let Christy come on in and let me know.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much, Akira. So we do have quite a few questions that have come in. So I will read them here. We'll go through one at a time. So the first one, my 12-month-old recently transitioned to 1 nap a day for approximately 1.5 hours and wakes up around 3 p.m. Bedtime is between 7 and 7:30 p.m. He takes anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to fall asleep on his own. He mostly sleeps through the night, but wakes up after 10 to 10.5 hours. Is this enough sleep? Is there a way to get him to sleep in a bit later?
Great question. So also it does sound like things are going really well. That transition to one nap at 12 months can absolutely result in a bit of shorter nighttime sleep, but 10 to 12 hours of sleep is definitely acceptable. So if he's getting on the lower end of sleep, it's absolutely okay. 10 to 20 minutes to fall asleep is still reasonable, especially depending on how long this transition has happened. In order to get them to sleep a little bit longer, you can absolutely do things like a super dark room or a white noise machine to help extend. And if they're waking up super early, you can actually just delay before you go to pick them up right away in the morning to see if they'll fall back asleep and get a little bit more sleep. But my thoughts are that this will transition between 12 and 14 months, and they will slowly start to extend that sleep.
Perfect.
And Christy, if you could just leave the question up until I answer it, because some of them have quite a few questions in it, so I can read it again.
No problem. So this next one, they have a 21-week-old who can put themselves to sleep in a crib for their nap time and for the beginning of bed. Then after the sleep cycle, 40 minutes later, he wakes up crying and can't put himself to sleep. They have been nursing and co-sleeping at night. Should I just let him cry when he wakes up? If so, for 30 minutes to an hour. Then nurse, feed every 3 hours. What is your advice on this schedule?
Okay, so regarding the naps, it is quite difficult. Then after the sleep cycle, 40 minutes, he wakes up crying. Okay, so if they're having short naps, so if the naps are only 30 to 40 minutes, it is difficult for them to go back to sleep after getting that amount of sleep in the day. So daytime sleep is definitely a little bit harder to achieve. So if they are experiencing short naps in the day, an early bedtime is always helpful to ensure that they're not getting too overtired. If we are co-sleeping and nursing at night, it definitely can start to become a sleep association. So however they're falling asleep, when they wake up, they're looking for that same support to get back to sleep, and it will also encourage more frequent wakes. So allowing them to fall asleep more independently will prevent them from waking up. So the goal here is not what to do when they wake up, it's preventing them from doing it entirely. So I would love for you to book a complimentary call so that we could address that a little bit more. But the goal here would be, how do we get this little one to fall asleep on their own so that they don't keep waking up? And if your choice is to let them cry, I would make sure that the rest of all of the other elements are aligned, because if we just leave them to cry and they're hungry or they're overtired or undertired, they likely will just be crying in vain for an extended period of time.
Perfect. Our next question is, what if they resist naps for weeks and are still tired and yawning during the day?
So resisting naps. So this is going to depend, Sandra, on how old your little one is. So if they're not getting the right amount of daytime sleep, maybe their schedule needs to be jigged a little bit. So yeah, I do say like maybe sometimes it does take a couple weeks, but we do need to make sure that their schedule is aligned. So again, I'd encourage you to book a call so we can make sure we can do a little mock schedule and see if they're on an age appropriate fit, because that's going to be key to making sure that maybe we don't need to offer them that nap, or maybe we should be offering it to them at a different time.
Perfect. And are you going to be able to share the presentation that everyone can see on the screen right now with them after the webinar?
Sorry, say that again?
Are we going to be able to share the actual presentation on your computer with the attendees after?
The same presentation?
Yeah.
I actually have the charts that I'll be able to share.
Perfect. Fantastic.
Will that work? Okay.
Perfect. Our next question is can the routine be the same for naps and bedtime?
It should be the same. That's a great point, because every opportunity that we have to put them to sleep and for them to consistently have that same experience, the better they're going to learn. So the more consistent we are, the better it's going to be for them for sleep.
Perfect. And how much time should we give them to settle for their night wakenings?
So again, it depends on why they're waking. So if we're letting them settle for an extended period of time and they're actually hungry, it may take them a very long time to settle. So it's ensuring, have their nutritional demands been met? Are they on that perfect schedule? Are they undertired or overtired? So those are things that are all gonna, that's what it's going to depend on. But I would say, giving like a few minutes, like if you can hang out for a few minutes, 5 minutes or so, and see if they transition. And if they don't, maybe assessing, oh, well, she did go to bed really late, or she went to bed really early. So that's a possibility. So it really could be tough for them to settle for an extended period of time. But I would say like 5 minutes or so would be a good place to start.
Thank you. Next question is, my 2.5-year-old used to sleep on his own, but since he started jumping out of his crib, and since the quarantine, it takes forever to get him to sleep on his own. He wakes up and jumps out and comes to me in the middle of the night.
Okay, so the first thing is that we want them to stay in his crib. So definitely building a routine and lots of conversation around staying in the crib. But also with this age group, there's likely maybe needing a little bit later nap or a little bit later bedtime because they're not able to burn all that energy. But if they're climbing out of the crib, there are some things that we can do to help help them not climb out of the crib anymore. So I would encourage you to book a call so that we can talk about that a little bit more, but also making sure your crib is on the absolute lowest setting. A sleep sack is actually really helpful too, to prevent them from climbing out. And then when they do climb out, making sure that we're putting them directly back in consistently so that they know that this is where they should be sleeping.
Thank you. Next question is, should I allow my 2-month-old to sleep on their own schedule, i.e. let them fall asleep when they want to, or should I start putting them to sleep using sleep props, for example, rocking?
So it's really common for this age group to fall asleep on their own or to fall asleep rocking or during a feed because they're still quite young and they're only awake for about an hour at a time. So I would say, making sure that within an hour, if your little one's been awake for that long, give them an opportunity to sleep. So you can put them down in their sleep space, try to do like a little maybe song, put them down. If they don't go down, you could try to pick them up again. If they don't go down after a couple attempts, then I would try to do what you can to get them down. So if that's a pacifier or rocking a little bit, that's completely okay at this age, but making sure that they have an opportunity around every hour or so to fall asleep.
Perfect. Next question. My 11-month-old is a pretty great sleeper at night. Will fall asleep no problem and sleep for 10 to 11 hours. However, naps have always been a challenge. He will never sleep more than 20 minutes unless he is on my lap, where he is right now as she was watching this webinar.
So yeah, 11 months old is definitely an age group where they can really fight a nap. So depending on how late they went to bed, how much overnight sleep they're getting. So I would say an 11-month-old does need at least one nap. Most 11-month-olds are on 2 naps, but it's gonna come down to the routine. So that routine, setting that expectation that it's time for sleep, and even if they don't sleep, they do need to have that quiet time. And I find it could impact nighttime schedule a little bit, so their bedtime might change a little bit. And they can absolutely act like they don't need a nap. But after a period of time, if several weeks have gone by and they're starting to get cranky or nighttime sleep is starting to be affected, which can happen, I would start to look to some similar nap routines as your bedtime routine, because it seems that that's already amazing. So I would try the same routine at bedtime and don't give up.
Perfect. The next question is, does a 21-week-old need a schedule or just go with wake times? If they roll onto their tummy but can't roll back, should they leave him?
So 21-week-old, I would say they're really starting to become a lot more in control, but you have to be comfortable. So watch your baby. Canadian Pediatrics and American Sleep Association, like, back is best. So if they do flip over, make sure that they are safe and like you're able to flip them back. Once they get a little bit older, if you're comfortable with how they're able to move their head, they may do those transitions on their own. But if you notice that they are on their stomach and it's unsafe, I would encourage you to flip them back over. Also, when it comes to the schedule, I would say definitely awake time schedule, really the only schedule 12 hours a day, 12 hours of night, and then focus on the awake times. And I'll just share the awake time schedule here. Okay, I'm just gonna stop sharing this and share a new screen. Okay, so I'm just sharing an awake time cheat sheet here with you. So this is absolutely a range, but if you have no idea where to start, this is where I would recommend you start, and then start to let your baby show organically. So if your baby is, 6 months old and at the 3-hour mark, they're like crying, they're completely exhausted, I would scale that back by 15 minutes. So this is definitely going to be helpful for you to understand where your little one should be in terms of setting a schedule, where we really want to just focus on awake time and making sure they're going to bed within that 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Window.
Thank you. We have one more question.
Yeah.
My 3-year-old used to go to sleep on his own and sleep through the night. Since he has been home full time due to self-isolation, he has regressed and won't go to sleep without a parent in the room. He also wakes up consistently throughout the night screaming for a parent. Any advice on getting him back to his independent sleep?
This is so tough. You're definitely not the only one. I would, start back at the drawing board, recreate your bedtime routine, maybe with some fun new elements, a new book, allow them to choose, from 3 pajamas every night, or something that's fun that can bring you back to routine. And I recommend starting that routine a little bit earlier. So encouraging them to go to bed a little bit earlier, especially if they're not on a nap. I find that some babies around this age are not, maybe they're not burning as much energy, but they're just getting like mentally tired, so cranky at bedtime, but just because they're not stimulated as much as they're used to. So reevaluate your bedtime routine and be super, super consistent. When your little one wakes, encourage them to go right back to bed and keep as consistent as possible. I do have toddler programs as well that I can help you create like a new routine to help encourage them to stay in bed. But at this point, I would say just try to be a little bit more patient. A lot of parents are going through the exact same thing, and just try to reinvent that routine and be super, super consistent.
Perfect. I think that's all the questions that we have today. So I just want to thank you again, Akira, so much. That was very, very helpful. And thank you to all of our parents for joining us today. We hope that everyone has a great long weekend.
Thank you so much.